Montana Territory. Summer of 1874, the wind carried dust and judgment through the town of Red Rock when Naomi Trent was cast out of her family's home. The screen door slammed behind her. Her mother's voice followed like a curse. "You bring death wherever you go. You always have." Naomi stood barefoot in the dirt, her palms scraped from falling earlier in the barn. Her father had not looked at her once, not even when she begged. Not even when she reminded him that she had buried her baby brother with her own hands when the fever came and took him. They said she was cursed after that. As if she had whispered sickness into the air. As if sorrow made her wicked. She was 21 and alone, with nothing but the clothes on her back and a satchel of dried peaches she had stolen from the pantry shelf. Naomi walked. She walked until her feet bled, then walked some more. For 2 days, she moved through open land, sleeping under the stars, drinking from creeks, and praying for a reason to keep going. On the 3rd morning, she came across a cattle drive camped just off a bend in the Yellowstone River. About 15 men, all with the same sunburned skin and tired eyes. She almost turned around, but then her legs buckled. She hit the ground hard. "Hey!" A voice called out. "Hey! Someone get water!" Boots thundered closer. A man knelt beside her. His hands were rough but careful. "You all right?" he asked, brushing her hair back. "Can you hear me?" Her eyes opened slowly. The sun behind him made the edges of his face glow. She blinked. His jaw was unshaven, his eyes green. "Where am I?" she whispered. "About 10 miles north of Red Rock," he said. "Name's Gideon Shaw. You just about passed out on my horse's water pail." Naomi tried to sit up. Pain hit her ribs like a hammer. "I can go." "You are not going anywhere," he said, standing. "Bring her some bread and a blanket." She was too weak to argue. The men looked at her like she was something strange, but Gideon did not. He just brought her water and bread and sat with her while she ate. By nightfall, she was strong enough to speak again. "I am Naomi," she said, her voice hoarse. Gideon nodded. "You running from something, Naomi?" She looked away. "My parents said I was cursed." He raised an eyebrow. "That right? They think I bring bad luck. My brother died. My cousin lost his leg in a saw accident. Mama says I bring death." He stared at her for a long moment. "You look like someone worth keeping to me." The words landed somewhere deep in her. She dropped her gaze, not sure what to do with them. "I do not need saving," she said. "Good," Gideon replied. "I am not in the business of saving. I just do not like seeing good folk starve when I got enough beans for 2. She stayed. That night, he gave her his bedroll and slept near the fire. She watched him from the corner of her eye. He was quiet, steady. The men listened when he spoke, but he rarely said much. By the next day, he had given her a pair of boots, patched but dry. "You hungry?" he asked. She nodded. "Then come help me ride fence. We will be back by sundown." Naomi was not used to kindness without strings. But she followed him. They rode side by side for hours. He did not ask questions, just told her about the land, the cows, how he had come from Arkansas after the war and never looked back. "Why do you stay out here?" she asked. Gideon shrugged. "Peace, quiet. I do not owe anything to anyone out here." Naomi nodded slowly. "I like that." They reached a broken fence post just before sunset. Gideon dismounted and pulled a hammer from his saddlebag. Naomi watched him work. The muscles in his arms flexed with each strike, sweat dripping down his neck. She looked away quickly, heart thudding faster than she wanted it to. "Come here," he said, pointing. "Hold this post steady for me." She stepped close, hands wrapping around the wood. Their fingers brushed. Her breath caught. He looked at her, really looked. "You are not cursed," he said quietly. "You are just hurt." Naomi pulled her hands away. You do not know me. No, he said. But I want to. They rode back in silence, but something had changed between them. That night, she sat beside him at the fire. The men played cards a few feet away, their laughter low and easy. Naomi leaned in. Why did you say that earlier? Because I meant it. She looked into the fire. Everyone I have ever loved has left me. Gideon reached over and placed his hand over hers. Then maybe it is time someone stayed. The fire crackled between them. She did not pull her hand away. The next morning they rode out again. Naomi learned how to guide the cattle, how to spot a snake in the grass, how to tie a saddlebag so it did not slip. Gideon watched her, always close, never overbearing. And when she really laughed for the first time in weeks, he smiled. You got a good laugh, he said. She looked at him. You are strange. He chuckled. I will take that. Each day she grew stronger. Her cheeks filled out. Her hands grew calloused. The men stopped looking at her like she might break. And Gideon never once treated her like she was anything less than whole. One evening, as the sun fell behind the hills, he found her standing by the river. You all right? He asked. She nodded. Just thinking. About what? She turned to him. About how I never thought anyone would look at me the way you do. He stepped forward. And how is that? Like I am not broken. Gideon looked at her, eyes steady. You are not broken, Naomi. She took a breath. I think I want to stay. He moved closer. Good. I was hoping you would. She reached for his hand. You still think I am worth keeping? He smiled. More than ever. And when he kissed her, it was slow and sure, like he had been waiting for the right moment all along. Naomi kissed him back, arms sliding around his neck, heart thudding against his chest. She had been cast out, called cursed, left behind. But here, in the arms of a cowboy named Gideon Shaw, she felt something she had never known before. Wanted, chosen, safe. And for the first time in her life, she believed she just might be worth keeping. The cattle drive pushed northward, the days stretching wide under the August sun. Naomi rode beside Gideon most mornings now, her posture straighter in the saddle, her eyes set ahead like a woman who'd decided her direction. She didn't speak unless she had something to say, same as him. But when she did, he listened like it mattered. Late one afternoon, they passed a ridge where the land opened into a valley thick with cottonwoods. Gideon raised a hand and slowed his horse. The herd followed his lead, the other drovers easing into a lope behind them. Naomi glanced over. Why are we stopping? He tilted his head toward the trees. There's a creek down there. Good place to rest the cattle. And you. She didn't argue. Her thighs ached from the saddle, and her hands stung from the reins. When they made camp near the water, she stepped off her horse with a quiet groan. Gideon noticed. You're riding too tense. I'll get used to it, she said, brushing dust from her skirt. He tied his horse and walked toward the creek, boots soft in the grass. Come here, he said over his shoulder. She followed, wary but curious. He knelt by the water, cupped some in his hands, and splashed it over the back of his neck. Then he looked up at her. Take off your boots, he said. She blinked. Why? You've been limping since midday. Water's cold. It'll help. Naomi hesitated, then sat on the bank and peeled them off. Her socks were damp with sweat, her ankles rubbed raw where leather met skin. Gideon didn't comment. He just rolled up his sleeves, waded in, and offered his hand. She took it. The creek bottom was slick with stone, but he steadied her. They stood ankle-deep in the current, the water biting but clean. She breathed in slow. Feels like it's pulling the heat right out of me. That's the idea. He let go once she found her balance. She watched him crouch, scooping up handfuls of water and letting it fall back through his fingers. "You always this quiet?" she asked. He looked up with a half-smile. "Not always. Just most of the time." "Why?" He straightened, wiping water from his palms. "I spent 2 years in places where talking got you killed. Learned to keep my words until they're needed." Naomi stepped closer, the water swirling around her calves. "That's a hard habit to break." Gideon nodded. Still trying. She crossed her arms, the breeze lifting her damp hem. "What did you do after the war ended?" "Drove mules down in Wyoming for a bit, then made my way here. Bought a few head of cattle with the last of my pay. Built slow from there." Naomi watched the water move past her feet. "Is it strange? Being your own man after taking orders so long?" He thought about it. "Some days. But I'd rather live by my own hand than anyone else's command." She met his eyes. "I like that." They walked back to camp in silence, boots slung over their shoulders, the last light catching on the water behind them. That night, Naomi sat beside one of the older drovers, a man called Whit, while she mended a tear in her sleeve. He offered her a stub of tobacco and told stories about a buffalo hunt gone wrong near Billings. She listened, needle moving through fabric, the firelight warming her face. Gideon watched from across the flames, a quiet ease in his shoulders. Later, when the others had turned in, Naomi stayed by the embers, her hands idle now, her thoughts shifting in slow circles. Gideon approached with 2 tin cups. He handed her one, steam rising from the black coffee inside. She took it without a word. He sat beside her, knees close enough to touch. Neither of them moved away. "I've been thinking about winter," he said. She sipped carefully. "What about it?" "Once the cattle are delivered, I'll head back to the homestead. Got a cabin out past the Gallatin Range. Needs a new roof. And someone who knows how to cook better than I do." Naomi turned her cup in her hands. "You asking me to come?" "I'm asking if you want to." She looked at him, the fire catching in his eyes. "How far is it?" 3 days' ride, maybe 4 with snow. No neighbors close by. Just a ridge, some trees, and a barn that leaks. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she studied the horizon beyond the dark trees, where the stars hung low and close. "I used to dream about a place like that," she said, "where no one knew my name. You don't have to be anyone but yourself out there." She set the empty cup down. "I'd need to earn my place." "You already have." His words settled deep. No fanfare, no pleading, just truth. She leaned back, arms wrapped around her knees. "I'd like to see it. The cabin. The ridge." He reached over, brushed a curl from her cheek. "Then we'll make it yours, too." She didn't speak again that night, but she didn't need to. When he stood, he offered his hand. She took it. And as they walked to their bedrolls beneath the open sky, something steady passed between them, not a promise, but the quiet beginning of one. The herd crossed into the Gallatin Valley 3 days later, the air thinner, touched with the scent of pine and stone. Naomi rode with Gideon through the last of the foothills, her hands confident on the reins, her eyes set ahead. Their pace had slowed with the slope, but neither of them minded. The others peeled off as they reached the final stretch, each man heading toward his own claim or wintering place. By the time the last rider tipped his hat and turned east, it was just the 2 of them. Gideon's cabin sat tucked along a wooded ridge, the roof slanted beneath a tall spruce, its boards grayed from sun and time. Smoke hadn't risen from its chimney in months, but a stack of dry wood waited under the eaves. Naomi stepped down from her horse and stretched, her back aching from the last climb. Gideon unlatched the door with a flat rock he kept on the sill, then pushed it open and stepped inside first. She waited until he lit a stub of wax and set it on the shelf before following. The room was small, but the walls were solid, the floor swept clean of mice or rot. A single bed sat against the far wall, a rough pine table in the center. A chipped basin rested beside a water barrel, and a narrow ladder led to a loft barely large enough to crawl into. Naomi ran her fingers along the windowsill. "That roof still leaking?" "Not anymore," he said, setting their bags down. "Fixed it last fall." She nodded once. "Good." The next morning, she rose early and found a patch of sun near the cabin's edge to warm her hands. The air held a chill, but the land was quiet in a way that settled deep inside her. Gideon stepped out with 2 tin cups, his shirt sleeves rolled, his boots already dusted with frost. "There's a spring past the ridge," he said, handing her one. "If we're hauling water, we'll need a barrel sled." She nodded. "I can help build it." His eyes narrowed slightly. "You ever worked with timber?" "No," she said, taking a sip. "But I can learn." They spent the day cutting pine from a nearby stand, dragging stripped logs back with ropes. Naomi learned how to notch the beams with a hand axe, how to brace the sled frame so it wouldn't buckle on snow. Her palms blistered by late afternoon, but she didn't stop. Gideon worked beside her without comment, his focus steady, his movements practiced. When the sled was finished, they tested it on the slope behind the cabin. It held. That night, she cooked with what little they had: dried beans, salt pork, and the last of the cornmeal. Gideon watched her stir the pot over the hearth, his hand resting lightly on the table. "Where'd you learn to cook like that?" he asked. "I didn't," she said, tasting the beans. "But I watched a woman in Red Rock make do with worse." He leaned back. "You always pay that close attention?" She glanced at him. "Only when I don't want to go hungry." He gave a quiet exhale, neither laugh nor sigh. "You ever think about leaving Montana?" "No," she said. "I've been left enough. I don't feel like doing it to someone else." He didn't reply to that, just stood, crossed to the hearth, and added another log to the fire. Days passed. Naomi mended the roofline over the porch with flattened scrap tin, while Gideon cleared brush from the east pasture. When the rains came, they worked indoors, stripping old wool for quilts, carving spoons from cedar. She discovered a mouse nest in the wall and patched the hole with flour paste and cotton scraps. He showed her how to read the wind in the smoke draft, how to tell if snow was coming by the way the crows flew low. One evening, she found him in the barn, oiling the hinges on the tack chest. A lantern burned low beside him. She leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "You always take care of things like this?" He didn't look up. "They fall apart if you don't." She stepped inside, her boots soft on the dirt floor. "You treat people the same way?" He paused, set the oil can down. "People aren't tools." "No," she said, walking closer. "But they break just the same." He met her gaze. "I don't fix people, Naomi. I'm not asking you to." His jaw shifted, something unreadable in his eyes. She moved past him, reached for a folded saddle blanket on the wall. "I just want to be somewhere I don't have to explain myself every day." He stood still a moment. Then, quietly, "You already are." She turned the blanket in her arms. "Then maybe now I can learn what else I am, besides all the things I was told." He stepped forward, slow. "You're not cursed." "I know that now," she said. "But I didn't before." He touched her face, thumb brushing her cheekbone. "You don't have to prove anything to me." "I'm not," she said. "Just want to build something that can stand through winter." He nodded. Then, softer, "I'd like to build it with you." The silence hung between them, warm and full. She reached up, fingers grazing the edge of his collar. "Then we start with the walls, and see what holds." He kissed her there, in the barn, with the lantern flickering low and the scent of oiled leather all around. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't uncertain. It was a choice made quietly, like everything between them. Later, curled against him under a quilt stitched from old shirts and flour sacks, Naomi lay awake listening to the wind move through the trees. Gideon's arm rested across her back, solid, steady. "You ever think," she whispered, "that maybe some people are just waiting for the right place to grow?" His breath stirred her hair. "I think you just found yours." And as sleep came, she believed him. By mid-September, the first frost clung to the grass at dawn, and Naomi had begun stitching heavier linings into their coats. The mornings were quieter, the birds fewer. She'd taken to rising before the sun, not from habit, but from a need to make the days fuller. The silence of the ridge wasn't empty, it asked something of her, and she was learning how to answer. She was splitting kindling behind the cabin when Gideon returned from the south trail with a fresh-cut deer slung over his saddle. He dismounted without a word and set to dressing it with practiced movements, his knife clean and sharp as he worked in the chill shade behind the barn. Naomi kept her distance until he paused to wipe his blade. "You see any tracks near the ridge?" she asked, setting her hat back on her head. "Elk, mostly," he said, "and a single wagon passed 2 days ago, heading west." Axel looked split, judging by the ruts. "Anyone with it?" "Didn't see sign of it stopping. Might have limped past toward Virginia City." She nodded, then glanced at the deer. "You'll want help hanging that meat." He caught her meaning and handed her the rope without asking twice. They worked in tandem, hoisting the carcass onto the meat pole Gideon had built years earlier. Naomi's shoulders burned by the end of it, but she didn't complain. She'd grown into her strength piece by piece out here. No one had handed it to her. Gideon turned to her once they'd finished. "You ever do any trading?" "Some," she said. "My uncle ran a dry goods store for 2 years. Taught me how to measure flour by feel and how to spot watered molasses." He nodded once. "You think you'd want to ride into town next week? There's a new post up near the river crossing. Might be we can trade some venison, maybe get more kerosene." She studied his face, reading more than the words. "You want me to see what's changed since Red Rock? Or you want me to see if I've changed?" He didn't answer right away. Then low, "Maybe both." She wiped her hands on her apron. "Then I'll go." The journey to the new post took them a day and a half. They rode light, taking only what they meant to trade. Dried meat, 2 rabbit pelts, and a pair of carved ladles Gideon had shaped from cherry wood. Naomi packed a wrapped bundle of dried mint she'd found along the creek, hoping someone might barter for it. They reached the post at dusk, the smell of tobacco and horse sweat drifting from the small cluster of buildings. A lantern flickered in the window of the trading house, and the sound of a fiddle drifted from the saloon next door. Naomi dismounted slowly, eyes catching on the people moving in and out of the store. A woman stood on the porch, her shawl wrapped tight, watching them with guarded interest. A child peeked from behind her skirts. Inside the store, the shelves were half-stocked, but the clerk greeted them with politeness. Naomi laid the mint on the counter. The man tilted his head. "Not often we see green like this late in the year," he said. "Dried it myself," she replied. "Good for tea or poultices." He lifted a tin from beneath the counter. "I can give you a sack of cornmeal and half a dozen candles for it." She glanced at Gideon. He gave a faint nod. "That'll do," she said. Afterwards, they stood outside in the falling dark, the horses tied and calm. Naomi watched the saloon doors swing open and shut, men drifting in with their shoulders hunched against the cold. "Feels strange," she said. "What does?" "Being seen by people who don't already know what they think of you." He looked at her. "What do you think they see?" She considered that. "A woman with dirt on her hem and calluses on her hands. That's not all." "No, but it's enough." They stayed in the hayloft behind the store that night, the owner offering it in exchange for a small share of venison. Naomi lay listening to the wind whistle through the slats. Gideon lay beside her, one arm behind his head, the other draped across his chest. "You ever think," she said, voice low, "about how far we are from where we started?" He shifted slightly. "I try not to. I try to stay where my feet are." She turned toward him in the dark. "My feet are here, but sometimes my thoughts go back." He reached over and found her hand. "Then I'll keep you steady when they do." She didn't sleep right away. She watched the way the moonlight painted strips across the floorboards, and she listened to the sound of his breathing. Come morning, they loaded their goods and rode out before the sun cleared the ridge. Naomi didn't look back at the post. A mile from the cabin, they found the trail washed out by a slide of wet shale. Gideon dismounted and checked the slope. Naomi followed, careful with her footing. "Could dig it out," she said, "or reroute higher." He studied the incline, then pointed toward a narrow deer path that climbed to the right. "We'll go up. Safer." They led the horses single file, boots sliding over loose stone. At the top, the land opened again. Naomi paused, breath catching in her throat at the sight of their cabin below. Smoke curling from the chimney Gideon had lit with the last of their kindling before they left. It looked small from here but solid. Real. She turned to him. "You ever think we've built something worth keeping?" He looked at her, quiet for a long moment. "I know we have." She didn't need more than that. They made their way down together, the horses steady behind them, the cold wind rising through the pines. By late October, the wind had turned sharp enough to lift the edge of a coat and carry it halfway across the ridge before you realized it was gone. Naomi had begun keeping a kettle on the hearth at all hours, not always for tea, sometimes just to warm her hands. The days shortened. The ground grew harder underfoot. But the quiet between her and Gideon didn't shrink with the season. If anything, it grew deeper, more rooted. She found herself humming some mornings as she set bread to rise. Not any tune she remembered, just something that came while her hands worked. Gideon never said a word about it, but once, passing through the door with an armful of firewood, he paused beside her, leaned briefly to kiss the side of her neck, then went on as though it had been the most natural thing in the world. The cabin took on more shape with each passing week. Gideon built a shelf above the stove for her herbs and scraps of dried wild onion. Naomi patched a draft beneath the door using strips from an old riding skirt. They spoke less of the past now, not from avoidance, but because it no longer asked to be named. Their eyes were turned forward. One morning, Gideon came in with a letter, a folded scrap of paper from a traveling post rider who had passed through near the upper trail. He handed it to her without a word. The handwriting was unfamiliar, but the name at the bottom made her breath still. "From my sister," she said, voice thin with surprise. He lowered himself onto the bench. "Didn't know you had one. She was younger. Left home before I did. We hadn't spoken since." She read the letter again, slower this time. "She's settled in Helena. Has her own sewing table. Says she heard I'd been seen near Gallatin." Gideon waited, quiet. "She wants to visit," Naomi said. "Wants to know if I'd welcome her." He didn't press her, just reached across the table and set his hand over hers. "You want her here?" "I think I do." "Then write her back. Tell her she's got a place to sit." It took 3 days for the reply to be carried down the pass, but Naomi didn't count the hours. She kept busy weaving a new curtain for the loft window, and Gideon worked on reinforcing the barn door before the next storm rolled in. When her sister arrived on foot 2 weeks later, cheeks flushed and hair bound with a strip of blue ribbon, Naomi was already waiting at the gate. They stood a moment before embracing, no tears, just the kind of hold that says more than 100 letters ever could. Gideon stepped back, giving them space, and Naomi caught his eye over her sister's shoulder. She didn't need words to thank him. That night, her sister slept in the loft, and Naomi lay beside Gideon, their fingers interlaced beneath the quilt. "She looks like you," he said. "She acts like herself," Naomi answered. "She's strong. She always was." They didn't speak of it again. The days that followed were filled with simple things, showing her sister the creek, letting her knead dough into the shape of her own palms, teaching her how to patch a boot sole. Naomi watched the way Gideon let her sister be, no questions, no assuming, just space to belong. The morning her sister left, Naomi packed a parcel of dried apples and the last of their summer beans. Gideon saddled her mule without being asked. Before she walked down the ridge, her sister turned. "You're different, Naomi." "I know. Good different." Naomi smiled. "Safe different." When they were alone again, Gideon came to stand beside her at the edge of the woods. The air was clear, and smoke curled gently from the chimney behind them. "She'll be all right?" he asked. "She always finds a way." They stood in silence, the forest stretching out below them, the wind pressing gently against their backs. Naomi leaned into him, her shoulder against his chest, her breath steady. "You ever think about what comes next?" she asked. He looked down at her. "Like what?" "Like planting something that doesn't need to be moved." He brushed her knuckles with his thumb. "You mean staying?" "I mean staying on purpose." He nodded once. "I've been thinking about adding another room, for you to keep your sewing things in or whatever you want." She turned to him fully. "And if I wanted to raise something here?" He met her eyes. "What kind of something?" She touched her belly, quiet. "Something that'll need a cradle come spring." He stilled. Then he reached up, cupped her face in both hands, and kissed her slow and full. Not like a question, but like the answer had already been written. "Then we build it strong," he said, voice rough. "And we build it together." That winter, Gideon cleared a patch of earth near the southern slope, using the time between snowfalls to mark out the frame of the new room. Naomi stitched warm blankets from wool traded at the post and lined a cedar box with soft cotton for the baby to come. They didn't speak of the past anymore. It had no place in their days. When the child came, it was a clear night, and the snow had stopped just long enough for the stars to show through. Naomi held the boy against her chest, his breath warm and damp against her collarbone. Gideon sat beside her, one hand on her shoulder, the other curled gently around their son's tiny foot. "He's got your mouth," Naomi whispered. "He's got your eyes." They named him Elias, after no one in particular, just a name that felt as certain as the land beneath them. That spring, the room was finished. The cradle sat beneath the window Naomi had sewn the curtain for, and the breeze that drifted through carried the scent of pine and thawed soil. Gideon built a bench beneath the oak tree, and some evenings they sat there, the baby asleep between them, the sky stretching wide and quiet above. Naomi didn't feel like someone who had been cast out anymore. She felt like someone who had chosen, and been chosen in return. Her hands knew the lines of this place, the sound of Gideon's footsteps across the floor, the weight of her son as he curled against her chest. She had not been saved. She had not been redeemed. She had simply found a place where her name meant something new, and a man who saw her not as what she had survived, but as who she had become. And in that life they had built, steady and slow and stitched with care, she was not alone. She was home,